Hello, folks. I am Tracy Poulin-Dunn, the Vice Chair of the Ontario Workplace Health Coalition. The OWHC's vision is that all workplaces will recognize that an employee's mental, physical, and psychosocial health is fundamental to an organization's success. We are here today doing an interview for our upcoming Readers Cafe. But OWHC has lots of fun and exciting stuff. We do run events for our members, educational information and collaboration and sharing of ideas with regards to workplace health. Right now, we are chatting with Deborah Connors. Deborah Connors is the author of a new book called A Better Place to Work: Daily Practices That Transform Culture, which is full of stories of transformative workplace change. Deb is the founder of the Workplace Conference, which some of you may remember from its older name, the Health, Work, and Wellness Conference, which is now run by the Conference Board of Canada and is in its 23rd fabulous year. This initiative, which Deb led for over 17 years, created a whole generation of workplace health professionals and a huge community of practice. Deborah is a captivating speaker, storyteller, author, and workplace coach. She teaches leaders to radically shift their cultures so that people can flourish. Now, stay with me and we're going to have a conversation with Deborah Connors. We've got Deb Connors with us today, and we're going to be discussing her latest book, A Better Place to Work: Daily Practices Which Transform Culture. Thank you very much, Deborah, for taking some time to chat today.
Great to be here, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you. So Deb, my first burning question is, what inspired you to write this book at this point in time?
Well, I, as you know, ran originally the Health, Work, and Wellness Conference, which became the Better Workplace Conference for 17 years. And I had brought in so many fantastic thought leaders from around the world. And when I finished running the conference, I felt that if I could pull together a lot of them, the focus of their work, their research is around workplace culture. And if I could interview some of those featured influencers and bring it together into a book, it could be a great resource for people. So that was my focus, is really focusing on culture and who is working on that around the world and doing those in-depth interviews.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, because you achieved just that. It is an absolute wonderful resource for anybody in a workplace who's interested in how to develop a healthier culture, a more productive culture, and a culture which is more psychologically safe. So thank you very much for that. Can you tell us a little bit about, you introduce a concept in the book called automatic writing. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that can play into the workplace?
Sure, Tracy. As you know, the book is about daily practices that transform culture. And so what I introduced throughout the book is over 50 practices that we can take on as leaders. Some of them are team practices, some of them are organizational practices. And one of them, personal leadership practice, is the practice of reflective writing. And it's just the practice of taking some time, usually in the morning or sometime through your day, where you can, I usually suggest set a timer, because that gets me going. If I do that and I think, okay, well, I'm just doing this for 5 minutes. And you put pen to paper and you may be writing about whatever your challenge is today, or a vision or something that you're working towards. And there's just something about the writing process that changes things, and you come up with different things than you do than if you're just talking to someone or if you're thinking about an issue. And what I suggest is in this process, if you can't think of anything to write, you just write that. You just keep your pen going and you write, I can't think of anything to write until something comes, and something will. And I often find that if I'm setting my timer for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, when I get to the end of that, I want to keep writing. And if that's the case, then keep writing. But the idea of just setting a timer is it gets us to do it. Because I think a lot of times people think of these practices, whatever they might be, meditation, writing, gratitude, that sort of thing, and think, oh, it's going to take a lot of time. And so we just put it off and we don't do it. And so the idea of just setting a timer gives us that short period of time where we do this practice. And you will be surprised when you start writing about how it changes you and how it helps you to start thinking differently.
How could an organization incorporate that into some of their business practices? I know you may have brainstorming exercises that happen right now. So how would you incorporate something like reflective writing into a day?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because one of the practices I talk about in the book is reflective action. This comes from Dr. Robert Quinn's work. He was one of the people that I interviewed. And reflective action is really looking at, if you look at say a line between being too reflective, where I'm, looking at every angle to an issue. So I'm so reflective I can't actually make a decision, to being too active, where I just make decisions without really thinking about them. What we want is to be right in the middle. We want to find that sweet spot where we're doing enough reflection before we take action. And what I find in the workplace right now is that the go-to strategy for making decisions is brainstorming, as you mentioned. And so we have a decision to make as a team. We brainstorm, and we might get a whiteboard and ask people to shout out ideas, and that gets some ideas out, but it doesn't always reach everyone, because everyone responds differently in a different way. And so one of the practices that you could use in a meeting is taking a moment to ask people to reflect first before they jump in with answers, is to take a moment, take a piece of paper, give them a couple of minutes to reflect on whatever the challenge is and write down some notes. And then follow that with a discussion. And even then, sometimes people don't speak up. So I often use sticky notes and ask people to write their ideas on sticky notes and then put them up. And then we can look at all of those ideas together. And so that way we're hearing from people that we don't always hear from, for one thing, but we're also allowing everybody to reflect before they speak, which changes what comes out when we do speak. And another way of incorporating more reflection into your meetings is getting your agendas out earlier. So sending that agenda out maybe 48 hours before the meeting, and asking people to take some time to reflect on that agenda item, so that they can come to the meeting able to have a discussion about it. And so often in meetings, we get that agenda just as we walk in the door, and so we don't have that time to reflect. So those are a couple of ways that we can incorporate reflection into our work.
It's absolutely excellent. I like the fact that by following a reflective writing practice, you're also supporting and encouraging those members of the team who may be introverts. And so where a brainstorming exercise, to your point, you don't get those great nuggets of information that they may have stored up. So exactly. I think that's a great practice.
Yeah, and as you say, we often we hear from the people who are the loudest, right?
Yes.
The ones who have the most to say, and they're not necessarily the best ideas. So
exactly.
Yes, it's a way to draw out from everyone.
One of the other things, phrases and items that you talk about in the book is positive deviance. How do you describe positive deviance?
Well, when most people hear the word deviant, they think about negative behavior. But deviance, of course, is just being able to deviate from what is normal. Could be negative, could be positive. So positive deviance is moving in a positive direction from what is normal. And that's so important in the workplace right now to think about, because even though there are many great stories of positive change in workplaces. I am seeing a trend of, more awareness. You're probably noticing this too. There's more awareness about organizational health. But there's still very negative stories that we hear every day. Stories of burnout and overwork and lack of recognition and real dysfunction in the workplace. And so I really encourage organizations and leaders of teams to think about how can I positively deviate from this? What can I do differently? What can we do differently to deviate from what is normal? What has become the norm, because the norm is often, as I said, negative. One of the people I interviewed for the book was Dr. Martin Shane, who you'd be very familiar with, and he says that if we're not doing things to create a more positive workplace, it will be getting more negative. Dr. Quinn talks about this as well. He talks about slow death, which is the natural process for an organization. If we're not creating a more positive organization, it does tend to spiral into slow death. So we need to be asking that question now more. And one of the ways of moving in that direction, probably the only way, is to change our behavior, to change what we practice on a day-to-day basis, which is why I focused on daily practices in this book.
Thank you. So, but if there is a problem or an issue with an organization that they're trying to fix, looking at it critically and saying, what is the problem here? Maybe it seems like a natural way in which to address that problem. What are some of the shortcomings of taking that approach?
Well, there's two, as Dr. Robert Quinn says, two worldviews. One is the positive one and one is the conventional one. And so conventional management have typically taken the problem-solving approach. And there are times when this is necessary. But when we look at problem solving, we're looking at just the available fixes for that particular problem, and that limits our thinking. When we look when we ask the question, what is our vision and where do we want to be and how can we get there, it opens up more possibilities. So I think that's the difference. There is, as I say, a time and place for conventional management, but we do need to move more toward transformational leadership and looking more at vision and asking those kinds of questions.
So where does culture fit in when an organization's going to look at their strategy? What is the role of the discussion that we should be looking at when we think of culture?
Well, culture really needs to be a part of that discussion. It's if we don't change our culture, if we don't shift the culture, nothing really changes. Most strategies are very technical. For example, we may feel we need more recognition in the organization, so they're technical or program, I should say. So we develop a recognition program, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's great to have maybe once a year where we're giving out awards for various things, but that doesn't usually change the culture too much. Another approach to that, when we're looking at increasing recognition, would be to look at how can we incorporate recognition, appreciation, gratitude into what we do on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, if I'm a team leader and I'm in an organization that's wanting to shift their culture to incorporate more gratitude and appreciation and recognition, maybe what I'm doing as a practice is I'm starting my meetings with a win. I'm asking people to tell me what was a win this week. Did you bring on a new client? Did you finish a project? Everybody has them, but we tend to focus on the problems and the challenges.
Right.
And so, another way that I can do this as a team leader would be to say, at the beginning of a meeting, recognize somebody, one person on my team at every meeting. Every person is probably doing amazing things. We don't always recognize them in front of their peers. And it's an easy thing to do. So once we start doing that on a regular basis, people start feeling more recognized. We could then, move to maybe starting our meetings with a round of gratitude. And I find when we do that, when each person is saying something that they're grateful for, they do start to recognize their peers as well, because often they're, grateful for so-and-so for helping them, supporting them on a project, etc. So those are just some ways that we can incorporate that, subtle culture shift into our strategic work.
Excellent. Now, those are great examples, and they seem that they're very dependent on an organizational manager or a leader to kind of help the group through that exercise. Are there things that you would suggest that frontline employees could do on their own if they didn't think it was that receptive from the management or the leadership team? So as an individual, that they could do differently.
Yes, and that's why I focused in the book on individual practices, team practices, and organizational ones, so that anybody could pick this book up, anybody who works in any workplace, and find some practices that they could incorporate into their own day-to-day work that will make a difference. And so, for example, if we look at gratitude, we know from the research that, first of all, we know that as positive emotion increases, as our positive emotion increases, we are more creative, we're more innovative, we're more engaged, we're more productive, all the things that any organization would want for their employees. And so one of the ways of increasing positive emotion of the many is having a personal gratitude practice. So personal gratitude practice is sitting down once a day and writing down at least 3 things that you're grateful for. And it sounds very simple, and it is. It only takes 30 seconds, a minute each day. But over time, what we know from the research is that this increases our positivity level, it increases our resilience, it increases our optimism, we sleep better. There's so many benefits. And the first research on this was from about 15 years ago, where it was done with a group of college students. And the college students, one group was asked to do just what I said. They gave them a journal. They asked them to write down 3 things they're grateful for. Another group was asked to just write about their day, whatever happened. They weren't given any instruction. And the third group was asked to write about all the negative things that happened in their day. What they found was that there was absolutely no difference between those who wrote about the negative things, and those that just wrote about their day. But those that focused on the positive, what were the things that they were grateful for, when they measured their positivity, it was higher, their optimism was higher, and their possibility thinking was higher. And so this study has been replicated many times now in the workplace with people with severe depression, various groups, and it always shows the same result. So when we start focusing on the things that we are grateful for, it starts to change, rewire our brain, and we start looking more for the positive. We start being more possibility thinkers. And so that's one very simple practice of many that I talk about throughout the book that an individual could participate in on their own. That's going to change things for them, and hopefully they could share that with some of their work colleagues.
Perfect. Thank you. You also mentioned that resilience when you were discussing with regards to developing that trust component. So can you talk a little bit about resilience and what an individual in a workplace can do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there are many, many practices that we can participate in that help us to be more resilient. I mean, one of them is gratitude. That does impact our resilience. But also just disconnecting from work, setting boundaries around how you are connected with your workplace. So, not checking your work email in the evening and on weekends, if that's a possibility for you, and hopefully it is. taking your vacation time, taking downtime away from your devices. Talk about email intelligence practices in the book, how we can be more intelligent about, who we copy on emails, and how we manage our emails. One of the practices I suggest is setting 3 or 4 times a day where you go in and check your email for a certain period of time. You measure that time, maybe it's 15 minutes. You answer things, you delete, you file, and then you get out of it. Because if we're living and working in and out of our inbox all day long, it does tire us, and we're multitasking, and it takes us, it takes away our focus, and it exhausts you over time, and it impacts your mood, etc. So there's lots of research on that as well. So there's many practices like those that I suggest in terms of increasing resilience. But one last one I'll mention is sleep. We don't give enough credence to sleep, and it has such an impact on how resilient we are. And so just having habits in the evening, getting away from our screens at a certain time at night, and doing things that help us to have a good restful sleep.
Wonderful. That's one of the things that I love about this book is the fact that it doesn't matter where you are in an organization. This is just loaded with valuable information on things that I can do as an individual, as a team member, as a leader, which is going to positively impact the entire organization. So it's a gem. Deborah, as we start to wrap up, what's the one burning question that you wish I would have asked that I didn't?
Well, I think I think that the most important thing here is to think about, how can I shift myself first? If you're a leader and you want things to change in your organization, if you're wanting your culture to shift, you need to shift yourself first. In order to shift the culture, as many, like including Dr. Quinn says, we have to be able to transform ourselves. And so, as an individual, one of the things that and this goes for senior leaders all the way down to anybody in the organization, a good question to ask yourself is, what are my hypocrisies? What are my hypocrisies as a leader? What do I say that I don't do? Do I say that balance is important, but then I send emails on Sunday evenings, and so my staff are picking them up? And am I working through lunch? What message am I sending? So I think asking that question, what are my hypocrisies, it's a difficult one to ask, but it's also a very important question to ask, and can make a huge difference. And I think the message really is, I have to shift myself first if I want to shift my team or my organization.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Deborah Connors. Again, is author of A Better Place to Work, Daily Practices That Transform Culture. And Deborah, I want to thank you for spending time and chatting with me today.
Oh, you're welcome. And it was great to have you in our 8-week course, Tracy.
Thank you.
The other thing I meant to mention is that I have an online 8-week course that goes along with the book. It's kind of like an online book club, but with some instruction and some online coaching. And so the members of the course read a chapter or two, and we meet each week and discuss, and it just helps to kind of move through the book and to be applying practices in your workplace, and then coming back together with other people who are doing the same. So we have another course coming up in April I'd love people to know about. And if you're interested, you can find the information on my website, which is deborahconnors.com. And Tracy took the course this fall, so it was great to have you involved in that, Tracy.
Well, you know what? It was a wonderful learn and experience, and it's kind of like the Reader's Cafe, but in greater depth. So it's looking at the book chapter by chapter and pulling out all of those gems. So going through the book is wonderful, but having the opportunity to participate in the course over 8 weeks is even better. So I encourage everybody to do that. So thank you once again, Deborah, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon.
Okay, thanks, Tracy.
What a wonderful conversation that was with Deborah Connors, talking about her book, A Better Place to Work, Daily Practices That Transform Culture. Deborah mentioned our Readers Cafe, in which we have. So your Ontario Workplace Health Coalition takes a look at different books, and we get our members together to discuss the different thoughts and ideas. And it's a really fun, exciting time to hear the different perspectives that people have with regards to the books that they're reading. So I encourage you to participate. If you're an OWHC member, you can find out more about it at our website, which is www.owhc.ca. And once you hit onto the website, you're going to see some drop-down tabs which will tell you about our events and how to become a member. Great sort of community to be a part of, which we share information and have guest speakers come in and talk about how we can help transform our workplaces to be healthier places in which to be. Thanks.